Have a reporter asked me not long ago, like, are you stressed? What's your level of stress regarding the CBA? And I'm like, look, I've been hanging on by a thread in the W for years now. I thought it was over after the pandemic, after the bubble season. So I've been fortunate and blessed to be around this long. Like, I think I just want to see the players fight for, what we feel we've earned and what we deserve at this point, and hopefully an agreement is.
Watch that moment closely, because it reveals far more than a casual comment in an interview. Sydney Colson openly acknowledged that for years she has felt like she's been barely holding on to her place in the WNBA, describing her career as if it has been hanging by a thread. She even admitted she believed her professional run was finished after the 2020 bubble season. Yet now, despite that uncertainty about her own longevity, she's positioned front and center urging players not to sign the proposed collective bargaining agreement. That contradiction is the key issue observers are zeroing in on, because it raises questions not just about her stance but about what's really motivating certain voices in the negotiations. When someone who openly doubts her own long-term future in the league takes a hardline stance that could risk an entire season, critics naturally start asking whether the incentives driving that position are short-term rather than strategic. Labor negotiations in professional sports are always complicated, but they usually revolve around a balance between present gains and future stability. Here, however, some analysts argue the rhetoric coming from certain veterans suggests a different priority: maximize immediate leverage while it exists, even if that means gambling with momentum the league has only recently achieved. That's why this moment is being dissected so intensely. It isn't simply about one quote or one player's opinion. It's about what her statement implies regarding the internal dynamics of union leadership and influence. If a player who feels her career could end at any time is advocating for the most aggressive negotiating posture possible, skeptics say that reveals something fundamental about who is shaping the tone of these talks. They argue it suggests the loudest voices may be those with the least long-term stake in the league's financial trajectory. Supporters, of course, see it differently. They argue that veterans understand the system better than anyone and therefore recognize when it's time to push hard for structural change. From that perspective, Colson's comments don't signal desperation, they signal experience. Still, the contrast between her admission of career uncertainty and her willingness to risk a work stoppage is what keeps fueling debate. In labor disputes, credibility often matters as much as numbers. When the public senses a disconnect between a spokesperson's personal situation and the broader consequences of their advice, scrutiny intensifies. That's exactly what's happening here. The spotlight isn't just on the proposal or the percentages anymore, it's on the motivations behind the messaging and the question of who truly benefits from the strategy being promoted.
We want to play. People want to see us play, but I think you can't fault people, and I think that if our league didn't look the way we did, a lot of things, a lot wouldn't be said about us fighting for what we feel we deserve. But I think a lot of people.
Wait a minute, hold on. Let me rewind that a little bit. What'd she say?
Play, but I think you can't fault people, and I think that if our league didn't look the way we did, a lot of things, a lot wouldn't be said about us fighting for what we feel we deserve. But I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to women, people just don't think that we.
This is the stage where the financial logic becomes unavoidable, and it's also where many analysts say the argument starts to unravel. The central issue isn't whether players deserve higher pay. Most observers agree elite athletes merit strong compensation. The real question is whether the underlying business model can sustainably support the specific revenue-sharing percentages being requested. That distinction is critical because deserving more and being able to generate enough income to fund that increase are not the same thing. To illustrate the gap, commentators often compare league revenues. The NBA reportedly brings in more than $10 billion annually through broadcasting contracts, sponsorships, ticket sales, and global merchandising. That enormous financial engine allows it to allocate roughly half of basketball-related income to players while still covering operational costs and generating profit. By contrast, the Women's League's annual revenue, even in its strongest recent year, has been estimated at only a fraction of that figure. When two organizations operate on such dramatically different scales, identical percentage splits don't produce comparable outcomes. Economists emphasize that percentage-based demands must always be evaluated relative to total revenue size. A 50% share of a massive sum can be sustainable, while the same percentage of a much smaller sum can strain budgets or create losses. That's why ownership groups argue the math simply doesn't align with certain proposals. From their standpoint, pointing out numerical limits isn't an ideological stance, it's basic arithmetic. Critics of that reasoning say it risks becoming a convenient justification for maintaining the status quo. They argue that leagues grow precisely because they invest in players, marketing, and infrastructure, and that conservative financial strategies can slow that growth. Yet supporters of the ownership position respond that growth requires stability first. If expenses rise faster than revenue, expansion becomes impossible regardless of popularity. What makes this clash particularly intense is that both sides are using the same numbers to reach opposite conclusions. One interprets current revenue as proof more investment is feasible, the other sees it as evidence that caution is necessary. Until they agree on which interpretation is more realistic, every statistic introduced into the conversation will continue to fuel disagreement rather than resolve it.
See our young players in this league, the people who've been around, and
Y'all don't want to see nothing for them young players. Y'all not worried about them young players. You, Neka Gumake, none of y'all gonna be around for the next CBA. Y'all trying to get every little penny that y'all can. Y'all trying to get every dollar y'all can right now, because when the next CBA happens and they really get paid again, y'all ain't gonna be around for it. Stop the lying, man.
help get the league to where it is. People want to feel that they are receiving something for that. And if they don't, at least the people after me will.
Who helped the... Y'all didn't start doing numbers like this till 2024 when Caitlyn got here, bro. We all know that. And I'm not saying y'all can't ball. It's some certified ballers in this league that I enjoy watching. But stop, just...
Stepping back from individual statements and statistics, the broader stakes come into focus. The current agreement is set to expire after the upcoming season, meaning the decisions made in this negotiation cycle could shape the league's trajectory for nearly a decade. That's why the debate feels so intense. It isn't just about next year's salaries or benefits, it's about defining the economic framework that will govern careers, team investments, and competitive balance for years to come. One scenario frequently discussed is the possibility of a strike delaying or canceling games. If that were to happen, the impact wouldn't be limited to lost revenue in a single season. Momentum in professional sports is fragile. Casual viewers who recently discovered the league might drift away if there are no games to watch, and once audiences move on, winning them back can be difficult. Sponsors, broadcasters, and advertisers also make decisions based on consistency, so interruptions can ripple outward through multiple business relationships. Ownership groups, having historically absorbed financial losses, might be able to withstand a temporary shutdown more easily than individual players who rely on seasonal income. That imbalance of endurance is a key factor in many labor disputes. The side that can sustain losses longer often gains leverage over time. Critics of a strike warn that if negotiations reach that point, the pressure could ultimately fall hardest on athletes rather than executives. On the other hand, advocates for strong action insist that without demonstrating resolve, players risk being locked into agreements that undervalue their contributions for years. They argue that accepting a deal perceived as inadequate could set a precedent that becomes difficult to reverse later. From their perspective, short-term pain may be necessary to secure long-term fairness. What makes this situation especially consequential is that it arrives at a moment when interest, visibility, and commercial potential appear to be rising simultaneously. The league stands at a crossroads. One path emphasizes caution and incremental growth, the other bold demands and rapid change. Neither route guarantees success, and both carry risks. In the end, the outcome will likely hinge not just on financial spreadsheets but on trust between players and owners, between negotiators and fans, and between present ambitions and future realities. Whichever direction they choose will shape not only the next contract but the entire narrative of where the league goes from here.
Like the vets who've been around, who were role players, some who were impacted by the last CBA in a major way, or had teammates who were impacted because we took care of the highest paid players and we took care of the rookies. But a lot of middle people who should have still had a job got pushed out because of the difference of a few $1,000s and some other things.
I don't know, man. I saw Katie Lou Samuelson getting a max contract and she can't play. I'm just keeping it real. I saw Katie Lou Samuelson collecting checks and she can't play. She can't play no more.
But we just wanted to inform the younger players so that they knew exactly what was going on. Because I remember being a younger player and just being happy to be in the league and not understanding everything, or not even not understanding, mostly just not having a real interest to learn more because, look, I'm lucky to still even be here. So I'm not really trying to rock the boat. We want them to come in and feel empowered, feel knowledgeable about what's going on, and understand how this impacts them. So that was kind of the overarching energy in the room, just for them to come. If anybody has any questions, I think we were in there probably 2 hours, just for people to feel like they were on the same page and they could ask what they need to ask and walk away feeling like, okay, I understand this better because of the presentation or because of the way that y'all framed it.
Now the focus shifts from statistics to philosophy, and this is where negotiating strategy becomes the real story. On paper, the idea of reaching a deal that leaves no one completely satisfied but everyone reasonably content sounds like classic compromise language. In fact, that principle is often cited in business schools as the hallmark of successful bargaining. If both sides walk away slightly dissatisfied, it usually means neither side conceded too much. But the tone changes when the possibility of a work stoppage enters the discussion. When asked whether it would be more important to secure a completed agreement quickly or to hold out for ideal terms even if it meant missing games, the response emphasizing perfection over immediacy raised eyebrows among observers. Labor strikes can be powerful tools, yet they're also risky. They halt paychecks, disrupt schedules, and sometimes erode fan engagement. Choosing that path signals a willingness to accept significant short-term costs in pursuit of long-term gains. Analysts who question this approach point out that not all players are equally positioned to absorb those costs. High-earning stars may have endorsement deals or savings that cushion the financial impact of a shutdown, while lower-paid athletes could feel the strain much sooner. That disparity complicates the ethics of aggressive negotiation tactics, because the consequences of a strike wouldn't be distributed evenly across the roster. Supporters of the hardline stance argue that meaningful progress often requires sacrifice. They say that without the credible threat of withholding labor, management has little incentive to offer improved terms. Historically, many labor victories across industries have come only after workers demonstrated they were prepared to endure temporary hardship to secure lasting change. Still, timing plays a major role. Critics worry that pushing negotiations to the brink immediately after a surge in public interest could jeopardize momentum that might otherwise strengthen the league's bargaining position over time. In their view, consolidating recent gains first and negotiating later might yield better results. Proponents counter that leverage is strongest precisely when attention is highest, making now the optimal moment to press demands. This philosophical divide, strike now while leverage peaks, or stabilize first and negotiate gradually, captures the strategic dilemma at the heart of the dispute. It's not simply about numbers on a contract. It's about which long-term vision players believe will ultimately secure the strongest future for themselves and the league.
That's what y'all always love to run to pull the, oh, it's because we're a female card. No, it's not because of that. It's because the owners keep losing money year after year after year after year. It don't got nothing to do with you being a female. Why do y'all always try to run to that? It's so annoying. Like, bruh, y'all, it's almost like y'all want us to feel like just because you are women, you can ask for anything, send the owners to $1 billion in debt, and just because y'all women, we can't say, nah, they shouldn't do that. Just because y'all women, we shouldn't say that. Like, come on, like, stop, man. Stop trying to pull that. It's so annoying.
This next point is crucial because it deals with a structural issue rather than personalities or headlines. The previous collective bargaining agreement, according to many players, unintentionally squeezed out a large segment of mid-tier veterans. The system increased entry-level pay for rookies and protected top-tier stars with maximum contracts, but it left limited financial flexibility for teams trying to retain experienced role players. As a result, franchises faced difficult choices: either commit large portions of payroll to a few key names or spread resources thinly and risk losing depth. That criticism is widely acknowledged as legitimate. Salary structures in any league must balance rewarding elite performance with maintaining opportunities for reliable contributors who may not be superstars but still play essential roles. When a system tilts too heavily toward extremes, the highest earners and the newest arrivals, it can create a hollow middle class. And in professional sports, that middle tier often forms the backbone of competitive rosters. However, critics of the current messaging say the concern is being framed in a way that omits important context. They point to reports that veteran leaders held lengthy sessions explaining contract mechanics to younger teammates, urging unity and resistance during negotiations. On the surface, that sounds like responsible mentorship. But skeptics question whether those briefings presented a balanced overview or only one perspective. They argue that if discussions focus solely on why players should demand the maximum possible concessions without equally explaining ownership's financial constraints, then the education may have been incomplete. In labor relations, information asymmetry can shape outcomes dramatically. If one side fully understands both its own finances and its counterpart's limitations while the other side hears only internal arguments, expectations can become unrealistic. Analysts warn that when participants enter negotiations believing the opposing party can easily meet any demand, compromise becomes harder because concessions feel unnecessary. Supporters of the union reject that criticism, insisting solidarity is essential and that management's viewpoint is already widely available through public financial reports and media commentary. Still, the dispute over what younger players are being told highlights a deeper tension: whether unity should be built through selective messaging or through comprehensive transparency. That tension matters because long-term agreements affect careers, not just seasons. Decisions made now could shape salary structures, roster opportunities, and competitive balance for years. If players are making those decisions based on incomplete information, critics argue, they may later discover that the trade-offs weren't what they expected. And once a contract is signed or a season is lost, those consequences can't easily be reversed.